you should be keeping your drivers informed of legislation that's coming down or what updates you're hearing at the state level or the federal level from your associations, because again, it just lends to a better informed workforce, a better quality workforce.
Welcome to Drive, the podcast for truck drivers who are looking to enhance their lives both on and off the road, and for carriers who are looking for that perfect fit. I'm Chelsea Faulkner, and we're here to bring you conversations that will help to keep you moving forward in every area of your life. Whether you're a seasoned trucker or just starting off in the industry, this is a show for you. In this episode, we're cutting through the noise around driver testing and records, background checks, drug and alcohol testing, medical screens, and putting the power back in the hands of drivers. Marc and Grady join us to break down what these tests really mean, how drivers can protect themselves, and what companies should be doing beyond just checking the boxes. Marc, Grady, it's great to see you guys again. I know that we just caught up in Vegas. I got to meet you guys out there. How you guys been doing?
Well, we can't talk about the Vegas part, but since then we've been doing great.
For sure. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I mean, if we started talking about that rabbit hole, we'd probably be here for about 3 days worth of podcast episode, if we're going to be honest.
Podcast would go viral, though.
It would go viral. That would be a really good episode. Maybe we should have just recorded that entire experience live from the Bellagio.
Yes.
So before we get too far into things, can you guys tell me a little bit about what you guys do, what your role is in the trucking industry, how you got into the industry, and what that really looks like?
Yeah, so I'm Marc Bourne. I'm the Vice President of Background Screening, Training, and Compliance for Workforce QA. I've actually been in the background screening industry for about 26 years. I've been at Workforce QA for about 2 years and, really like the regulated industry of transportation. It's something that America relies on and depends on. So many logistics depends on our truck drivers. So I feel, I almost feel like what I do is a really important service and just love doing what I do.
How did you get into the industry, Marc?
So I've always been involved in security and investigation, started out doing uniform security, went into loss prevention, and that's kind of where I learned about this whole industry of doing background screening on candidates. And kind of as I honed my skills doing that, I'm also a licensed private investigator, which could be a whole nother episode. But, I really liked the niche of the regulated industry because of the requirements, and there are set checks that need to be done. And again, it lends to the entire safety of not only drivers, but the companies that are involved in trucking.
Absolutely. And that sure could be a whole other episode, especially since I'm pretty sure we sat at dinner and I questioned you round and round and round over whether or not you really were a private investigator or not.
I think interrogated is a better term.
Come to find out, audience, he really is a private investigator. He does have stuff to back that up.
Not on the Ferrari or the Hawaii, but otherwise it's only a PI.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And Grady, give us a little bit about your story. What is your background and how did your journey into trucking come about?
My father started a competitor to Workforce QA back in 1995. So I've been somewhat involved with it for a very long time. I sold my engineering company back around 2010 and I was looking for something else to do, had a non-compete. And my father said, hey, come work with me. So I did. So I got to work and day in, day out with my father for several years. He decided to retire. I ran the company for several years after that. And then about the same time as Marc, we decided to join forces with Workforce QA. And so my smaller company was acquired by Workforce QA. And so I've been working basically in the same industry, just with a bigger company since then. It's been a tremendous amount of fun.
So engineering into trucking, that had to have been quite a transition.
Yeah. It's you're still dealing with people. You're still dealing with problems. You're still dealing with, processes and things. So it's how things change. You go from building bridges and building roadways to working on the people that use the bridges and the roadways. So it's a different way of looking at the same problems.
And now the relationship between you two, did you guys know each other prior to coming into this company, or did you guys meet each other once you were already in the industry?
Yeah, we met each other 2 years ago when I came on board to Workforce, and we developed a great connection. We're usually right on the same page with things, so it's turned into a good friendship as well.
You're so authentic, both of you. And I really think that speaks volumes within this industry, especially with the fact that we see so often so many people trying to pull the wool over truckers' eyes in specific. They want to sell them the next position. Not only do they want to sell them the next position, they want to sell them the next big product that they have, the next app that they have. They want to get whatever it is that they are selling into the hands of that driver, whether it's authentic or not. So then whenever I meet people in the industry that are actually really, truly showing up as themselves and showing up authentically, those are the people I tend to hit it off with. So especially within the background screening industry and in this space, having two people who are as authentic as you two coming in, that's refreshing.
We talk to a lot that says, BS will get you about 5 minutes, and after that, you better know what you're talking about. You're a representative of the trucking industry. You see so many people that are trying to just knock and sell and move on, regardless of the product, without worrying about the industry as a whole, without, really getting back of what they do. And they're missing the best part of it. They're missing the enjoyment of the relationships that we get to have, how everybody's really been here for a long time, are aiming for the same goal. They're trying to accomplish the same purposes, and we work together. We're trying to sell our product. We're trying to earn a living doing this, and people in the trucking and other DOT industries need to have the products that we sell, and we need to provide it to them. And so we want to do it in the most professional manner possible. And that's a whole lot more fun than just, calling 1,000 people and trying to bang on their door.
I consider us more of a partner rather than a vendor. I mean, for me, it's not about necessarily selling our product, but it's having those conversations and educating the employers on what's out there, what's best practices, how can you find a higher quality driver, how can you find a professional rather than just a warm body. And whether you go with us, which we hope, or go with someone else, we just want you to make the right decisions and make sure that, it just lends to the safety of the entire industry, especially when you're dealing with, the compliance and how safe our industry, the trucking industry, really needs to be. And again, whether that's with us or someone else, we just want to make sure that they're getting the right services.
Absolutely. And Marc, Grady, I really feel like we've already kind of started into this conversation. But when we start looking at those relationships, let's kind of start with that bigger picture. I know you guys have both spent a lot of time helping drivers navigate the complicated systems that come behind records and testing. But underneath it all, it really starts with trust. And it comes down to trust and how those drivers trust you, how the companies trust you, and what that looks like. So why is it that you think that trust really matters so much between drivers and companies, especially around testing?
Well, it's a great question. And, we certainly would like to see that to be a high level of trust in every relationship. But unfortunately, we do hear a lot of issues with that. For our part, as far as the drivers go, we have a very short relationship. Most of them don't even know who we are unless, if you stay at the company for a long period of time and maybe you take a medication, you get to talk to our, some of our medical review staff on a regular basis just to explain any results you might have. And a lot of those drivers, we actually get to know, and we have, some sort of relationship. They call, they laugh, they give us their information, and we approve them, and off they go. Others are a very short-term relationship. But, between the drivers and the managers that are sending them for testing, I think you're right. The matter of trust, the way that testing is represented is so important. Nobody's trying to catch anybody in the drug and alcohol, the background testing world, right? We're just looking for transparency. We're just looking for a safer group of fleets out there. If people are taking prescription medications, or if they've got a little history in their background that they are representing to their companies about, that's what we want. We just want to see clarity. And different companies are going to hire different people based on, particularly on the background side. It's not just picking on anybody. We're not trying to make anybody feel like they are, not as important. It's just the opposite. As Marc alluded to, trucking is on public roadways. Just imagine if a manufacturing company was open to the public, right? You have half elementary school, half manufacturing. Think of all the testing that would need to be done there. Well, trucking, they use things that are, open to the public. And so we have to have a higher standard on the testing just to make sure that the fleets are there. And the important thing is, 95, 98% of drivers on the road are just that. They're professional. You've got a very small number of steering wheel holders that are just out there looking for trouble. And those are the ones that all the good drivers want to eliminate as well, because they're on the road with them.
To Grady's point, our time spent with the actual driver candidate is very short. So we want to make sure that experience is very easy for them. We don't want to make them jump through hoops. We don't want to have to pepper them with questions and follow-ups. So, making sure that our candidate experience, our driver experience is as easy and as simple as possible, I think goes a long way as well for the company, because a lot of times for that driver candidate, that's generally the first impression of the company that they're going to be working for, is going to the clinic and getting their drug test, or, filling out the forms to get their background check. So we want to make sure that that experience is as smooth as possible, so that way that driver can move through the hiring process as quickly as possible.
For sure. And I think that speaks volumes to any companies out there that are listening too, that are considering moving forward with you guys as far as a screening company would go. Because when you guys are willing to step out there and step forward and say, listen, we understand that we're advocating on behalf of you. We are representing you as soon as we step forth and we make that first phone call. We want to make sure that that experience is a positive one. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we're taking the time to build that relationship. That way, by the time that driver transitions over to you, they already feel safe, they already feel supported, and they already feel validated in the conversations that they're having. That's huge, especially in this industry. That's amazing.
In our company, we literally have a team that promotes everyone as a salesperson, right? No matter who you're talking to, even if it's somebody that has a drug and alcohol violation, they may have made a bad life decision. Who hasn't? What the repercussions of that, and they're not a bad person, not a criminal. You're just talking to them, and you have to say, here's the facts of the matter, here's what is going to happen next, and move on, right? You want to have, even those people have the best experience, but everybody that calls in, everybody that has an email, we want them to leave feeling like they've had a good experience doing whatever testing they had to accomplish, whether it's a company or drivers or, other applicant out there.
And I think that's key. Grady, is that communication with the driver candidates. They're going into a process where they may be used to dealing with a certain process a certain way, and then they're coming in and it's something different. They may have questions. Again, like Grady said, we treat everyone the same. So if a driver candidate calls in and has a question, we treat them exactly as if our client was calling in with a question. We take the time, answer it, because communication is key, especially the unknown. What are the services that are being run on me? What's this going to show? How far back are you going? We get those questions all the time, and we kind of walk that candidate through the process and let them know. In fact, on the background screening side, we have a candidate portal that they're able to go into and see every step of the way of where the process is in their background check, and they have the ability to reach out to us and get those questions answered that they have. Because again, it puts them at ease. It allows them to know exactly what's going to be reported to their prospective employer.
I love that level of transparency, especially when it's coming to something like testing, because a lot of times you don't, unless you're in the middle of this field and you're in the middle of the drug testing world and you know what that looks like. You have no idea what you're being tested for. You just know that you have to go and take the test in order to get a job. You don't know what they're actually testing for or what that looks like. And that can be incredibly intimidating. So what is it that you guys feel really helps drivers to feel supported instead of just feeling like they're being watched when it comes to records and screenings and things like that?
I don't know that the industry does a good enough job for that. I think a lot of drivers feel very put down upon, not only by dispatchers and managers, but maybe people in our industry as well. With the testing, they might be treated very rudely. And that sets a precedent that's hard to unwind. It really does. And so it's how can we as a whole do better, as treat people like people? I mean, that's kind of the golden rule. How can we as a company do better with that? I think it's just paying more attention, talking to people, trying to answer their questions and do things like your podcast where we're trying to educate them that there's not bad guys out there. Testing is required. Any product that's made in the country goes through good quality assurance testing. And that's what Workforce QA does, is quality assurance testing, just to verify that the products we're putting out on the road with your drivers are up to a very high standard that we all want.
I agree. And I think, kind of going back to my last point, it's communication. It's that fear of the unknown. If employers can give a step-by-step process to the candidate, this is what we're going to be looking for. These are the services that we're going to have our provider run. And this is what we're going to do based on the results. It's laying out that process so that the driver knows exactly what they're going in for. So it's not that surprise we're checking your criminal background and you had no clue. It's communicating and being transparent with the driver every step of the way, I think leads to a more professional candidate, a better quality candidate, and a more loyal candidate. Because if you're being truthful and honest and transparent, that builds that trust that we were talking about right from the beginning as that first impression.
Mark, I have to admit, I was laughing a little earlier when you're talking about taking those phone calls, because we both know that, and not to put down any particular competitors, but we get a lot of drivers that call in that have taken a test with a competitor, and they still want us to explain what's going on with the process.
Yes.
It's unfortunate.
Yes.
We try to explain gently, you need to call this other company. Well, they didn't answer the phone. Can you talk to me through it? Well, we can do somewhat, but we don't want to give incorrect information. So that's we spend more than a little time on those kind of calls as well.
So that may actually lend to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just to see what the answer is. But what is one common myth that you guys find that drivers are holding on to, or even one common misconception that drivers have in regards to background checks or the screening process?
I'll jump in here real quick because I know Grady and I were just talking about this before we hopped on here. I think the most common misconception or myth about background screening is if I do more than what's expected, or if I do criminal background checks, I'm not going to have a workforce, or that's going to exclude people that have had mistakes. Companies that are doing screening and that we talk to, the biggest thing about doing criminal background checks. Now, we know criminal background checks aren't required under any of the DOT regulations. However, that's best practices. You should do criminal background checks, but you're not using it to exclude necessarily a candidate. But it's just one more piece of that puzzle to put together that overall snapshot of the candidate. So just because someone did have a criminal record or might have been incarcerated doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be a good driver. It's about knowing what's in that candidate background so you know exactly where to place them, how to place them, and whether they'd be a good fit for the particular role that you're hiring for.
On the drug and alcohol side, it is not true that the seeds on a Big Mac can cause a positive drug test.
What about the poppy seeds on a muffin?
I know that's where you're going, but we actually get calls about the sesame seeds because they get some kind of a seed, and the Big Mac is the only one they have. So poppy seeds also do not cause a positive test under DOT. Years ago, we raised the minimal threshold so that somebody who ate a few poppy seed bagels still would not test positive, but anybody that actually used illicit drugs would. So yeah, the poppy seeds you would have to eat, I don't know, thousands. So not a challenge, Chelsea. I know you like your poppy seed bagels. But, yeah.
Okay, and what about that one time that they used their mom's CBD lotion?
Oh my goodness.
On their elbow.
It kind of on the elbow, right? You rub it in every day. That really is a challenge. That really is a challenge for trucking because there's such a culture of the THC culture that we're in now. Most people don't realize that back in the 80s, the reason we have commercial drug testing today is because of marijuana. There were huge issues in the military causing millions and millions of dollar damage, lots of lost lives, the railroad industry. And guess what? Those were not from any other drug. Marijuana was the cause. It caused impairment then. It causes impairment now. It's a challenge in our industry. As everybody on this podcast probably knows, THC is completely illicit for federal purposes. There is no reason for taking it, no medical, no recreational reason. Any product that's related to THC is just not acceptable. Technically, CBD is not tested for, but taking a CBD product or Delta-8 product or one of those things you get from the store could always contain an illicit THC. So yeah, stay away from that. There's too many drivers that want to skirt the edges, or maybe they were given a product. It's hard. It's impossible to distinguish who was truthfully duped or thought they were doing something different from somebody who is just, we smoke a joint is usually his excuse. It's funny, before 2019, 2020, when the CBD hit the market, the most popular excuse we heard was, oh, I went to a party, I will smoke, but a lot of people I was with did. Almost immediately upon the advent of CBD, that excuse changed. We don't hear about anybody that goes to parties anymore. Now everybody uses CBD. You have to take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So I want to know the answer to this one. What's the weirdest reason that you've seen a driver get flagged in a background check?
The years that I've been doing this, it's like, what's really weird anymore? I've seen it all. I think to kind of change that a little bit, I think it's not necessarily weird, but it's the surprise of companies who may not have been doing criminal background checks and then they start doing it. And then, they start seeing, over the years, I've seen homicide charges, I've seen prostitution charges. It runs the gamut of charges, but we don't generally see the actual details. And I'm sure there's stories behind all of those. But I think the takeaway here is that the importance of doing criminal background checks, if you're not, you will definitely be surprised at what some of the charges are that come back when you start doing it. We see everything.
I think the weird stories will kick in for every safety director when they call in John and say, "Hey, John, what are we seeing here? You didn't disclose this." And John says, "Well, the thing is," and just fill in the gap after that. So multitude of great stories, I'm sure, that all the safety directors and HR, Jill, it's good to hear.
I would say, being in the employment industry, being in the staffing industry myself, I'm here to tell you the amount of times that I've had somebody come in and sit directly across from me. I'm like, "So listen, we had something that came back. Can you tell me about this?" I had no idea that was there. And I'm like, "Really?" Because I had to Google what it was, and now it's in my search history. And I'm questioning how that's going to look when my employer looks through my search history, because I didn't even know what that was.
And I think, to your point, Chelsea, too, that's some really good advice in there to driver candidates that may have had a past or had records in their past, is be honest with your employer, because what you've done in the past may not exclude you from the job, but the minute that you lie on your application, it then becomes a current integrity issue. And it could be as simple as stealing a candy bar from a convenience store 10 years ago, but because you lied and said you didn't have anything, that's a current trust and integrity issue and will exclude you. So just be honest, because I feel like, especially in this day and age, employers have gotten really progressive about the second chance, fair chance acts, and really are taking into consideration, the time since the crime happened and how you've rehabilitated yourself. So be honest with your employers and explain what happened.
For sure. Let's get into the nitty-gritty with it. Testing, screenings, record keeping, it can all make or break somebody's career. But most drivers really only hear about some of these things when something's gone wrong. Marc, what is it that drivers really need to know about MVRs, PSPs, and clearinghouse records?
Yeah, so I don't think most drivers understand that they can pull their own records and keep track of that. I think we've all had experiences where government agencies have made mistakes. If I had to give one piece of advice to drivers that rely on this for their employment, is pull your own MVR. Go to your state DMV, request a copy of your MVR. FMCSA Clearinghouse, you can go on and review. Get those records and actually see what is being reported, because if there's a mistake, you can get that fixed. And it's better to get it fixed proactively than when you're looking for a job and you have to explain to an employer and go through that dispute process of something being on your record.
Marc, FMCSA is offering PSP monitoring now exclusively to drivers. So again, to get their own records, they can see that. Carriers, PPAs, other people can't see those records, but the driver to be able to get a real-time update. So definitely encourage everybody to be your own advocate, right? To see what's out there, challenging consistencies, talk to your employers, make sure that you're always managed.
And another thing that drivers may not be aware of is, if you are applying for a job and they do a background check on you, and you get denied employment because of that background check, you're entitled to a copy of that report. The company, under federal law, should be providing a copy of that background check. But if they don't, you have the right to request a copy. So that way you have an ability to dispute the information. So if an employer denies you employment because of the background check and they don't provide you an opportunity to dispute, speak up and ask them for a copy of it.
Absolutely. And two things I want to touch on real quick there. One, Grady, what you said about the fact that the FMCSA is currently offering PSP monitoring. I want to speak specifically to the drivers out there who have been in the same position for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years. I don't care how long you've been there. Go sign up for the PSP monitoring, because especially in today's day and age, especially with everything that's going on with the economy, with the market, where everything is sitting today, we have already seen so many different companies who have shuttered their doors overnight. You never know what could be happening tomorrow. Protecting your PSP, knowing what is on there, knowing what it is that you need to be doing in order to proactively make sure that you could be ready for the next step in your career, that is huge. And if the FCMSA is saying, here's a tool for you, please take advantage of that. Do not wait until it's the last minute and then you're all of a sudden going, oh my goodness, I need a job and there's all of this stuff on my PSP. How did this happen? If you could do it now, start that process now.
I tell people, not just government making mistakes, but identity theft is real. I mean, we all need to be looking at our credit card statements, but any licensure that you have in that PSP, that's the best way to see what's going on with that. Absolutely, 100%.
For sure. And then to Marc's point with the background checks, I'm here to tell you more than once we have went to pull a background on a candidate and had something come back that was not correct. It was not that candidate. It was in fact somebody that they were related to or not them at all. It was the reporting agency had mixed something up and reported something. And once the candidate had that report in their hands, they had the ability to dispute it. It was disputed and it came back perfectly fine and we were able to move forward with them. So please do not take that no as a door shut in your face completely. If there's something on there that you know is not you, go and dispute it. Yes, those processes can be a pain, but the job that's on the other side could be the thing that's going to make or break your career. And if you let it break you before you ever take the opportunity to step across that threshold because, oh, well, they said no, and I don't know that I want to put the effort forth in order to fight that, man, that really says something about how much you want to fight for your career.
Our job is to test, right? We did that. We try to be passionate about it. We try to just be totally fair. But you're right. If somebody has a challenge, a lot of times you can tell when a person is legitimately challenging versus, oh, I'm just going through the motions here, right? We want to know what's right. And then we go through the most extreme levels. On the drug and alcohol testing side, we actually go to levels above the DOT requirements specifically for methamphetamine. There are some additional tests that we go through to verify just to make sure that we get as accurate as possible at the laboratory side. And our MRO team is open. We try to be understanding. We try to listen to any possible excuse that a person could have to have a legitimate medical reason for whatever test is on there. And Marc, on the backgrounds, I know that you also go above and beyond.
Yeah, and it starts before that report goes to the client. Our specialists are trained. If something doesn't look right or it doesn't pass the smell test when we're doing that QA, to put it on hold, dig deeper and make sure that what we're reporting out is accurate, highest possible accuracy, because we want to make sure that what we're sending out is going to be right. The worst thing that you would want to do is put a label on a driver that doesn't need to be there.
On DOT drug testing, it's actually a two-step process. You can Google anything that can trick a drug test, right? But DOT is an extremely accurate process. The laboratories are highly regulated themselves. They have to do quality assurance testing regularly to show that they do it. And I don't know that many people know this, but if you have an issue with the DOT drug test, as a driver, you do have the ability to challenge that test with a competing laboratory. I mean, it's set up for as many opportunities possible. So internally, it's called a split specimen test. When you provide a urine sample with DOT, there's 2 bottles, right? If you're ever told that you failed a test, you do have the ability to have that test verified in another laboratory. Now, in full disclosure, the laboratories are like 99.999% accurate. Very, very rarely. I don't know that I can name one in recent history when we found one to be wrong, but I think it's due in part to that challenge, the ability to say, look, you can test me all day long, but if you're wrong, Marc over here, your competitor gets to test you. That changes things. And so that's driven accuracy very high in the DOT world. So the false positives, the way that these tests are confirmed is highly, highly accurate with the GCMS and LC duplicate MS testing that are out there.
I love this. I'm learning so much right now. So, Grady, tell me a little bit more about how drug and alcohol testing actually works and what drivers should really be watching for whenever they're going through that process.
A lot of drivers have known since the beginning, DOT has been urine-based testing. Urine-based testing has its drawbacks. There are easy ways to substitute a specimen. We work with collectors every day to make sure that they do the best testing as possible, but it's a cat and mouse game. There are alternatives out there. And so oral testing is hopefully going to happen soon. There are some challenges there as well, but that's going to be a saliva-based test that is just as accurate as the urine-based test. So it's not available yet, just to be very clear. It's hopefully going to happen soon down the pike, but that will give some other options to employers, partly to change up the testing process. And it is going to be dependent on the employer as to what type of testing they allow under which circumstances. But once that's defined, laid out, and available, it'll really change the landscape a little bit of the testing that's out there. Another thing that is out there is hair testing. Now, currently, a lot of large carriers do hair testing. They can do a lifestyle test. So, companies that do hair testing goes way back, 90 days or so. It looks for significant usage of illicit drugs. That's not a DOT test, but it's a company policy test. And not only DOT, but a lot of other companies outside of DOT do hair testing as well. But, what drivers need to understand about the testing process is that it largely hasn't changed for many years as far as the pre-employment, the random that's out there, post-action, reasonable suspicion. All these are very clearly laid out in DOT regulations. These days, there's more information than ever, so it sometimes makes it hard to navigate through when and why testing is required. But if you talk to anybody that's been doing it for any length of time, if you have any questions, we're always happy to help support when and where testing should be done under DOT regulations.
So what should drivers be expecting during a DOT physical or a sleep apnea screening?
It's funny. There's the changes happening at the end of next month with DOT physicals. So there's a lot of noise. We actually just did a webinar on it last week, and it was pretty well attended. Once a DOT physical is completed, currently you self-certify. There's a form. You go to your local DMV or SDLA, as it's called in DOT regulations, and you submit that form along with your medical card. They update your CDL. At the end of June, and actually 21, maybe more than that states now, but at least 21 states had already started an electronic update process. So when you complete your DOT physical, the medical examiner uploads that within 24 hours, the end of the business day, to the FMCSA, and then they send it to the appropriate state driver's license agency so that it's an electronic update. When this process works, it should be faster than ever. I'm sure many drivers out there have been highly frustrated with having to send that self-certification form 2, 3, 4 times, the DMV just not getting it done correctly or on a timely basis. So this really should speed it up. But, when it first happens, there certainly could be some issues on how that works. So you want to work with your medical examiner to make sure that they're appropriately updating that information to the feds. They've been updating it to the feds since 2018. The new change to the feds, FMCSA, will be sending it to the states starting in June. Now, what you do when you walk in is be prepared. If you have a sleep apnea, bring your report with you. If you have, other medications, if you have underlying conditions, get notes from your PCP, from your treating physicians that say this is under control, right? The examiner is not there to treat you. They're not there to diagnose you for a DOT physical. They are there to make an assessment on your ability to be on the road with their kids in a school bus full of other kids, right? And that's what we all want. It's a test. So be prepared by bringing in all that documentation, go through the process, and understand that it's an evaluation, it's an examination. So anybody that's been through a physical knows it's you're going to go through some observable tests on that.
Well, I know that we've talked about drivers being able to keep up with their records and things as far as watching those PSPs, watching those MVRs. Now, as far as things go, I know we've got a new administration sitting in the White House now. There's a lot of different things that are happening with different changes and things to policies and things that are happening as far as that goes. How is it that you guys feel that drivers could best stay on top of those changes that are happening with policies in order to avoid surprises as they're coming about and as they're happening within a federal level, so that they're not getting hit with something that they weren't expecting the next time that they go in for a DOT physical or the next time that they go in for some kind of a drug screen and they're like, oh, wait, this has completely changed. This was not what I was waiting for.
I mean, you can subscribe to something called the listserv. We all subscribe to that. But, those regulations are written pretty densely. It's a lot to unwind. So over hundreds of pages long with things change. So I don't know that going straight to the source is the best answer for a driver who's not looking for just a 400-page essay on how we're going to change 4 terms in the regulation. So there's a lot of industry publications are out there. You get several that should do a decent job of updating that. And what we found is there's a great discussion groups with drivers. Like drivers communicate pretty well. You got to watch the misinformation because that travels as better as fast as the information. But there's a lot of good stuff out there talking to your employers, right? I mean, getting that from them, particularly the employers that are involved in the industry associations. We go to a lot of industry trade shows. We try to give back to the industry as much as a lot of these carriers are involved with it. We see that carriers who are involved in industry associations have a significantly higher safety rating and program. And so we try to be where those guys are because we like to be with companies that have high safety ratings. But, the truckload carriers, the American Trucking Associations, the different state carriers, the private fleets for those that are out there, there are lots and lots of those. They can do a good job of distilling that information and getting it down to employers and drivers.
I agree. I think, your trucking associations and state organizations, that's generally where you hear things first. And hopefully that information then trickles down to the drivers, how we can keep drivers best informed. It's that communication. And if you're a logistics company, if you're a transportation company, you should be keeping your drivers informed of legislation that's coming down or what updates you're hearing at the state level or the federal level from your associations, because again, it just lends to a better informed workforce, a better quality workforce.
Now, Handled Now as a company has always pushed for better, not just in what we do, but in how we do it. So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like to move the system forward in a way that actually works for drivers. So what's changing in testing or in record keeping that you guys feel like drivers should really know about?
Geez, on the background screening side, I'm not really seeing any movement, as far as changes go. As of right now, I think it's kind of the same as what it's been. So employers need to look past just checking a box and setting their own standards, which, should be higher than what those DOT standards are.
Yeah, very well said. So the current administration is in a deregulation, right? And that's what the Trump administration was last time. For someone to suggest a new regulation, they had to recommend 5 that would be removed from the books. This administration is now at 10-1. So the American Trucking Associations has actually recommended a handful of regulations to be stricken. It's a goal to try to streamline that. That hasn't really affected any record keeping type of testing. As Mark said, the background physicals, there's always this consistent push to more digital, less paper. That's good and bad. You just got to be careful. Again, echo for drivers to keep the documentation. It's not hard to snap a picture of something. You take a test, take a picture of it. You get a physical, take a picture. Keep that for a few months just to make sure that you have a defensible position.
Do you think that tech is really helping drivers to have more clarity and have more control over their own records?
No. I think it's better for carriers. I think it incrementally helps drivers be able to get hired a little faster if testing can pass through. If it's digital, nobody's trying to transcribe handwriting or getting a name wrong, having to repeat that. That can take some time. So the digitalization does speed up the process a little bit. And we all know, pre-employment, we handle the types of testing differently. We want a pre-employment test to get returned and reported just as quickly as possible. Because if the wheels aren't moving, the driver's not earning money, the company's not earning money. And so we want to prioritize that. Something as simple as a drug test to hold up a driver being activated, it's critical, don't get me wrong, but it's also a small thing. So if it's negative, we want to get it reported just as quickly as possible to help with that. We don't want to be the last one holding up a test. So that digitalization does help a little bit.
That's absolutely fair. So what would you feel that a more driver-friendly process would look like?
Having more ownership on the driver, having them being able to own more of their data. We see this in other industries like digital wallets and things like that. It would be nice to have the driver be able to show up and be like, here's my stuff. This is what I already have, and have it authenticated so that there is less paperwork that needs to be done. Now, of course, the checks that we do, the background screening, the drug testing, that's a snapshot in time. So you're always going to need to be doing that. But there's other documentation that the driver can hold that can easily be transferred over to the employer that I think could make the entire process a lot easier.
So before we close out this segment, I'm going to do a quick round of rapid fire questions. We're going to start with Grady. One question that you think every driver should ask during a physical or screening.
One question they should ask is, will I get a copy of this?
Marc?
I agree. I think that's the most important question that a lot of drivers don't ask is for a copy of their records.
If you could redesign the whole testing system from scratch, what would be the first thing that you would change?
More electronic, more digital. We're in a digital world. I'd like to see us really go paperless. But I think in the preparation of redesigning is to get input from the drivers. I mean, they're the ones that we're sending to do these processes that we've put in place. We should have input from the drivers, and how would it make it easier for them?
I would test for more drugs, and I would make the system more able to adapt as new drugs come on the market. We're really hamstrung by federal processes that take years to add relevant drugs, and we're just the DOT panel it's washed out. It catches a lot of people. Everybody that's seen the clearinghouse knows we're catching a lot of people, but it just takes so long to get that one. In due process, right? We don't want to just be running so fast that we trip over ourselves. So there's a balance, but that would be something I would change there. Require drivers to bring in the most current physical and give examiners a way to see that that is the most current physical. Because too many drivers are like, what? I don't have diabetes. I don't have sleep apnea, whatever. And so I really wish that we had some type of regulated testing to make sure that our driving fleet was able to make sure that at least part of their health was addressed.
What do you guys feel is the best habit that a driver can build to stay ahead of everything in the testing and in the record-keeping side of things?
Either I'm best advocate. I mean, we just talked about that. Marc mentioned digital wallet. That's not hard today on your own digital devices to keep copies of everything, walk in there. We'll see professional drivers that they may change clothes, put on a nice shirt before they go in and see a supplier, before they go in. We all know the difference, right? We all know the difference between drivers and steering wheel holders. And those that come in prepared, bring a clipboard, here's my documentation, here's what I do. The driver that's really serious about this industry, and the three of us have been to enough of these trade show associations. When you see a driver of the year that's winning an award, we should all aspire to be that caliber of a professional person. Every time you see one of those ladies or men, what they've done, the years they've spent, the number of safe miles that they have, I mean, look to those people. Pick some mentors in the industry. If this is something you want to do it well.
To piggyback on that, it's, stay informed, learn everything you can about your industry, get involved, and that really will differentiate the professionals from what Grady had mentioned as just, the warm bodies that are holding the steering wheel.
One last rapid fire question. Who's your favorite connection that you guys made at the 10th Street Conference in Vegas?
10th Street, that's an industry. A lot of drivers use it. We are integrated with several different ATSs. 10th Street definitely one of the biggest in the country doing that work. They do a great job. We are integrated with them for carriers for all the services that we do: drug and alcohol, physicals, background services. You can use the 10th Street portal if you use it for your DQ files, any of that. So it's important for us to be at those conferences and partially to meet existing clients, meet new clients, meet people like Chelsea that are just, innovators in the industry that want to get the word out there, doing the staffing, you're doing the HR part of it, and you're also trying to connect with others. It's laudable. It really is.
For sure. And it's one of those things that I swear every time that I go to a conference, I meet people like you guys. You authentically show up with this passion and this drive that really reminds me of why I'm in this industry, why it is that I show up every day, and why it is that I want to move the industry forward in a radical way that shows people that this is more than just somebody that's behind the steering wheel.
Every time I go to a trucking conference, you leave there with that sense of being energized because you do see everybody coming together for that common goal of betterment for the industry. And it all trickles down right to one of the most important pieces, and that's our drivers.
Yes, it's absolutely invigorating because you're literally coming to the table with everybody. It's not just people who could potentially be your clients. It's not just people who could potentially be drivers that are coming onto your fleet. It's also your competition. So before we wrap up, what's one way that companies can shift that to make drivers feel supported instead of singled out?
If by saying we're looking for the best fleet that we can possibly have, and testing is something that we're all going to go through together. As a manager, I had to do it all the way up to our CEO. If a company can show that it's something that they truly believe in, it's a part of safety that's required, whether it's drug or alcohol or background, whatever kind of testing, if they can show that we're not picking on you. We all go through this because we all want to be the best of the best of the best.
Exactly. Telling that why. Why are you doing it? To Grady's point, it's, we want to hire the best of the best. Be transparent, communicate, and just lay it all out there of why we're doing it and what we're doing.
Absolutely. Marc, Grady, it was great reconnecting with you guys. I absolutely have loved this conversation. It has brought so much insight to me. I'm sure it's bringing a ton of insight to the audience. And if the audience would like to go out and reach out to you guys, engage with you guys outside of the podcast, where is it that they could best find you?
Sure. WFQA.com, Workforce QA. You just click on the contact page. Marc and I, we get copied on all of those emails. So love to have it. Just, mention the Handle Now podcast and we will be right on it. Be happy to respond to anybody out there.
Testing and record keeping are meant to protect drivers and the public, not to punish drivers. Marc and Grady's insights remind us all, knowing your rights, understanding the data, and working with companies committed to transparency can make a huge difference. This episode is a must listen for anyone wanting to navigate the testing system with confidence and clarity. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Drive. For more from Handled Now, head to handlednow.com and sign up for our newsletter. You can also join us on our Facebook group called The Driver's Seat and follow us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe wherever it is that you get your podcast.